Okay, next item up for business. As many of you who have Volkswagens are well aware, at least a four-cylinder Volkswagen. Kyle, I don't know if these are these a VR thing? I'm not a VR person. I don't know VR6s or VR5s or anything.
Yeah, they do.
Anyway, so this is, for those not in the know, this is an oil cooler sandwich plate, but rather than a standard oil cooler, this is an oil to coolant intercooler, I'd kind of call it, where coolant runs in and out of one section and there are cores in here, and then you pass oil between this. So you try to keep the oil and the coolant close to the same temperature, and you don't have a lot of metallurgical chaos going on within the engine. Well, the scary thing about that is, well, in a super high stress situation, you can't really keep things cool enough, and you kind of have to wait for the coolant to get cool to get the oil at the same temperature. Anyway, long story short, I got a super killer Kendall Johnson deal on an oil cooler that just so happened to be left behind at his shop. But it was a little tattered and torn, and it was missing a couple pieces, so I'm kind of working my way through rebuilding this thing. This is a standard Mocal, what is it, 235 millimeter, 19 row oil cooler, fairly standard for a four-cylinder. You know, I would worry more about the size if the sandwich plate that came with it was not thermostat controlled. But the good thing about this is that once you get this is a little closed loop here until you get the oil up to temperature, much the same as a water pump has a thermostat built in the bottom of it, where this thermostat will open at 180 degrees, and anything over that, it's going to circulate through this oil cooler. So thankfully mine came with some nice, hopefully nice lines that are number 10 GIC or AN anyway, to adapt to the sandwich plate. So what the sandwich plate was missing though was a gasket and the little adapters that adapt it to, one second, let me get this gross thing, to the actual flange that's on the front of the block. So this thing's gross and I need to clean up, I know. But the problem with this flange is that the adapter that came with it that holds this intercooler on is pretty long. So if you look at the difference between the sandwich plate and the intercooler, it's a lot different. So kind of have to get some new hardware. So if I wipe this off. So the sandwich plate is all fine and great, but you do have to mate it up the engine at some point. Like I mentioned, I did need to get some replacement parts, including the gasket, which I'll just fiddle in here, that actually I think I got from Pegasus Autosports or something that sell a replacement. And then this little adapter that actually adapts it onto the oil filter flange. So how this goes together is as follows. Oil cooler flange, or the oil filter flange, normally has a really big standoff. I have it over in a pile over there early when I get out. So there's a really big standoff there, so I need one that's short. So find one that's short, thread this in. Obviously I'll do more than hand tighten it at a later juncture. Then you can sandwich this thing over it, but oh no, what are you going to use to keep it on there? That's where this little piece comes in handy. I actually had to get this from Europe. Believe it or not, European eBay. There was only one guy that sold this specific diameter and thread pitch, which is actually, it's a standard thread pitch. It's not a metric thread pitch because Volkswagen wanted to continue to use whatever the American filter standard was. So fun little tidbit about that. But anyway, it's the same as this diameter. So that all slips together. Give me a second to thread this in. Then you have yourselves a nice, well, it'll probably actually go the other way, but you get the idea. A nice little flange coming off the engine into a sandwich plate, and then you have your lines that come out. Actually, they'll come out over here and go to the oil cooler in front of the radiator. So looking forward to getting all this cleaned up and assembled and all back on the engine. But in the interim, I'm just kind of stripping down the stuff that came with this oil cooler so that I can kind of get all this crap off my floor. I thought it was comical to note the sorts of things that prior owners thought were a good idea to protect these lines. So, I don't know if you can see this, I'm going to hold this up. This is what's called Tech Flex. It's actually what I have a nice roll of to protect wiring, but in this case, it was hockey stick taped to this braided stainless line. You know, I guess it's better than nothing, but I'm going to take this off of here, and what I'll end up using is something called Fire Sleeve, which is a nice fireproof barrier with a little heat protective sleeve that will get silicone taped around this, basically so that either if the line ruptures, you have just a hair of protection, although that's not really what it's for. What it's for is if this line either chafes against something or gets against something really hot by accident, or you have a flash fire. I don't know how much time you have if it catches fire, but it's to protect these lines from heat or chafing or fire. So I've got some more news about what I'm going to be using for that that's forthcoming, but in the interim I will remove this junk. Oh god. Oh, it was silicone under there. It was silicone, but they cut it, and then they just... Oh! Oh, it melted! Okay, that explains it. If it melts, maybe you should question why it melts and not just tape back over it. So, throw that in the trash. This hopefully is a fairly nice line. It looks like at some point somebody got on it with a not-so-friendly pair of pliers. But I know, I'm pretty sure Kendall pulled this off and it wasn't leaking or anything chaotic. So, you know, it's something we'll keep a close eye on. Maybe I'll run this without the fire sleeve briefly just on startup to make sure nothing peaks oil anywhere, and then after that pull it apart and put some fire sleeve on it. So I will decide that at a later date.